Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, you are the judges of the evidence to be laid before you. Be just and fear not, for the true administration of justice is the foundation of good government.
Famous jury trials, dramatizations of cases taken from actual court history. Names of persons and places have been altered to protect the identity of those concerned.
The State versus Vernon Craig.
It was late one Sunday morning in autumn several years ago that an event occurred which on the surface at least appeared to be typical of the many tragic accidents all too common during the hunting season. The scene was the living room of the home of Vernon Craig, a young businessman of the town. 3 persons were present: Vernon Craig himself, his wife Louise, and his wife's sister Anne. Craig had just made ready to clean his shotgun when suddenly it was discharged and Mrs. Craig was instantly killed. Craig's explanation that it was an accident was accepted by the police until an investigation revealed discrepancies in his story, whereupon he was arrested, indicted, and charged with murder. We commence tonight's famous jury trial.
The State versus Vernon Craig.
When the trial began, a large crowd was present in the courtroom to listen to the district attorney as he concluded his opening address to the jury and began to examine his first witness, Mrs. Bertha Ladd.
Mrs. Ladd, you are acquainted with Vernon Craig and his wife, Louise?
Why, yes. I've known them since shortly after their marriage, 2 years ago. My husband and I live in a 2-family house. We have the upstairs and the Craigs live downstairs.
I see. Mrs. Ladd, the death of Louise Craig occurred on the morning of Sunday, October 22nd. Before that date, had you observed anything that might lead you to believe that they were unhappily married?
Yes, indeed. And there was scarcely a week went by that they didn't quarrel. You could hear them all over the house.
Did you ever overhear those quarrels?
Yes, often. Sometimes it was because of money. Mr. Craig claimed Louise was too extravagant. And sometimes it was women.
Women?
Well, of course, this was Mr. Craig's second marriage. He'd been married before and divorced.
Yes, I know.
On one occasion, it must have been last December, Louise said Mr. Craig was seeing his first wife again.
What did he say to this?
He said it was untrue and...
Go on.
Well, that he wished he'd never met Louise and that he'd never been divorced.
On what occasion did he state this?
Oh, I must have heard him say it almost a dozen times.
Thank you, Mrs. Ladd. Your witness. Mrs. Ladd, do you realize that your testimony makes you appear something of an eavesdropper?
Why, what do you mean? I'm just doing my lawful duty. The way that house is built, you can almost hear a whisper downstairs.
I'm glad you told us that. The jury will understand then that any dispute between Mr. and Mrs. Craig need not have been either loud or violent to be overheard.
Oh, no, I didn't mean that at all.
Never mind. That will do. Mrs. Ladd, tell me, were the relations of you and your husband with the defendant on a friendly basis?
Well, no.
Oh, you admit it. Then, of course, you knew your husband was once made the defendant in a lawsuit filed by Mr. Craig.
Yes, that's true.
And your husband lost that lawsuit?
Yes.
With a judgment against him for $1,200?
Yes, but
that will be all, Mrs. Ladd. You're excused.
Oh, but you haven't let me say
Mrs. Ladd, that is all. Step down, please.
You have no right to talk to me like that.
Call Mr. Cole Bronson. Cole Bronson. Cole Bronson.
Cole Bronson, take the stand, please. You solemnly swear the evidence you give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do. What is your occupation, Mr. Bronson?
I'm a railroad man, a conductor.
And you live?
Right next door to the Craigs, 1631 Forest Avenue.
Tell the court what happened on the evening of Friday, October 20th.
Some of the boys asked me if I wouldn't like to go out pheasant hunting for a couple of hours the next morning. Well, I like a little sport once in a while, so I said sure. I don't own a shotgun, though. So Friday evening I called on Craig and asked if I couldn't borrow his. He said sure and gave it to me right then and there.
And?
Well, when we got back Saturday night, I cleaned Craig's gun, then gave it back to him.
Will you repeat that?
I cleaned the shotgun.
And extracted the shells?
Yes, sir. I did that before starting home.
Anybody see you do that?
Well, Bill Phelps and Rod Tracy were with me. I guess they'd remember.
Did the gun contain any shells when you handed it back to the defendant?
Of course not. I cleaned it, I told you.
That's all. Your witness.
Mr. Bronson, it was pretty chilly hunting pheasants about then, wasn't it? Didn't you have something along to warm you up a bit?
Oh, a couple of nips maybe, sure.
A few nips, eh?
Yeah.
It was probably more than a few, Mr. Bronson. I've been on hunting trips myself. But you still think you cleaned the gun, eh? Well, that's all. No more questions.
Call Miss Ruth Seeley.
Ruth Seeley. Ruth Seeley.
Miss Seeley, you were the defendant's former wife, were you not?
Yes. But when I divorced Mr. Craig 3 years ago, the court gave me the right to use my maiden name.
Are you aware that the defendant has stated that he spent the afternoon of the Saturday before his wife's death fishing?
Yes, sir.
But where was he actually?
With me.
All that Saturday afternoon?
All of it.
Then, in spite of your divorce, you were still friends?
We were not. I'll speak quite frankly. I divorced Mr. Craig because I'd lost my respect for him. I just wanted to forget that I'd ever been his wife.
Move to strike out the answer.
Yes, strike it out, except we were not.
Why did he call on you then? No, I'll put the question in another form. What was the reason he gave you?
Same that he'd given me a dozen times before.
Oh, you mean that was not the first time he called since the divorce?
It wasn't.
And the reason?
I said that we weren't friends. I was speaking only for myself, of course. Mr. Craig had a different idea. He told me he was sorry for the past, that he was sorry he'd ever married again, and if I'd just give him another chance, he'd prove he could turn over a new leaf.
A new leaf?
Mr. Craig's failing was women. On the other hand, the failing of quite a few women seemed to be Mr. Craig.
Miss Seeley, while the defendant was, as he expressed it, turning over a new leaf, he was nevertheless a married man spending time with a woman other than his wife. Doesn't that strike you as odd?
Yes.
That's all.
Miss Seeley, it strikes me as odd that while you claim to have discouraged the advances of the defendant, you still permitted him to spend an entire afternoon in your company.
I couldn't prevent it.
Couldn't prevent it? Come now, Miss Seeley. Surely you don't expect the jury to believe that a competent young woman like yourself could be as helpless as that.
I happened to be in business for myself. I asked no alimony at the time of my divorce. I went to Millersburg, which is a much smaller city than this, and started a gift and bookstore.
Yes?
I'm there alone all day because I can't afford to hire a clerk. When Mr. Craig drove to Millersburg, he simply refused to leave my shop.
Well, so Millersburg doesn't have police protection, eh?
You mean I should have called a policeman to make him leave?
I couldn't very well mean anything else, could I?
If I'd called the police, Just exactly what you think would have happened to my reputation.
Millersburg must be a very strange place if a young woman can lose her reputation there because she tries to avoid the unwelcome attentions of a man. As a matter of fact, Miss Seeley, didn't you ask Mr. Craig to call on you?
No, of course not, I tell you.
Didn't you throw yourself at the defendant, admit that you were sorry you divorced him?
I tell you, I hate him, despise him. I hope he suffers for the wicked things he's done, and just as he's made me suffer. I hope they hang him.
Hope they hang him, eh?
I do!
Order! Order!
Hope they hang him. The jury might remember that. No more questions.
Ruth Seeley was a prosecution witness who did the people's case more harm than anyone had anticipated. The jury were quick to note her vindictive attitude towards the defendant. But the district attorney had other witnesses yet. Witnesses who could not be swayed or influenced by any emotion. For instance, the local coroner testified,
Louise Craig died instantly of gunshot wounds. The body was otherwise unmarked, and there were no factors involved.
and the head of the police ballistics department said,
The lethal weapon was a 12-gauge shotgun, double-barreled, with an improved cylinder sight and a modified choke lead. At the range involved, this was fully adequate to cause death.
When additional witnesses testified they'd seen the defendant in the company of Ruth Seeley and other women in the weeks before the death of Louise Craig, then the district attorney rested for the people. And the judge adjourned the court for a brief recess. We return to famous jury trials in just a moment. As the court resumed, the defense lawyer opened his case and concluded his address to the jury by saying,
And we will prove that the death of Louise Craig was not murder, but a tragic accident which the defendant could neither have foreseen nor forestalled. I call my first witness, Miss Anne Sinclair.
Anne Sinclair? Anne Sinclair? Take the stand, please, Miss Sinclair. You solemnly swear the evidence you will give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I do.
Miss Sinclair, you were Louise Craig's sister, weren't you?
Yes,
And you loved your sister?
yes. Been very close since childhood.
Then if you suspected that your sister had been murdered, you would wish to see her murderer punished?
Yes.
Have you a clear recollection of everything that happened on the morning of Sunday, October the 22nd?
Yes, sir.
Well then, tell the jury about it in your own words.
I...
Now, don't be frightened, Miss Sinclair. There's nothing to worry about. Go on.
Yes, sir. Well, Louise and I had gone to early services that morning. When we came home, we went into the living room. And about 15 minutes later, Mr. Craig...
Hi there, youngsters. Sorry I didn't get up in time to go to church with you two.
Hello, Vern.
Well, what's the matter with you, Louise? Why the scowl?
Where do you think you're going with that gun? Hunting again?
No, I'm just going to clean it. Might try my luck tomorrow, though.
Think you'll have better luck than you did yesterday?
Well, I couldn't have had worse.
I suppose not.
What's that, a wisecrack?
You didn't go hunting yesterday.
Huh?
You drove over to see that first wife of yours again.
Now, look here, Louise.
Oh, don't trouble to lie to me. I know where you were.
Oh, do you?
Why don't you admit it?
Well, all right, I did. Louise, listen to me. You misunderstand this whole thing. I don't give a darn about Ruth. You don't think I wanted to, do you?
I do.
Look, honey, she asked me to call her. In fact, well, she insisted. I didn't know just how to explain it to you, so I said I was going hunting.
Oh, you rotten, contemptible... Oh, I don't know what to call you.
Louise, how can you say such things?
You don't know a man the way I do.
Oh, but you're not being fair. I think it's awful the way you treat Vern. I wouldn't blame him whatever he did. He was so suspicious.
Oh, never mind, kid. Thanks, but I'll handle this. Louise.
Well?
Listen to me, Louise. I've been seeing Ruth because she told me she's in financial trouble. When we were divorced, she wouldn't take any alimony from me, so I felt it my duty to try and straighten things out for her.
Uh-huh.
Yesterday, she admitted what she really wanted was to win me back. She told me she still loved me, and I told her that I love you. That's all there is to it.
A likely story.
You don't believe me?
What do you think?
Very well. I don't like these quarrels. But I'm going to lay down the law a little around here. Until you apologize or give me the chance to explain, I'm going to do as I darn well please. You're not going to tell me anything about what I can do. You understand?
Do whatever you wish. I don't think I care anymore.
Well, it's not my fault. Anne,
Yes, dear.
hand me that oil and rag on the cabinet there, will you?
Yes. See? Here, then. My, this rag's terribly dirty and oily.
Oh, that's all right. Thank you.
Certainly doesn't seem to bother you much what I think. Maybe you wouldn't care if I did lose you. Maybe you'd be glad to be rid of me.
Ah, now, Louise, why act like that? You know darn well, honey, that... Louise!
And that's exactly the way it happened.
Tell me, can you explain the fact that the defendant's gun was loaded? Who loaded it? You loaded the gun?
Yes. I've seen it standing there. I was scared. I wanted to see if I could load it. Oh, it's all my fault. I'm to blame. It's all my fault.
That will be all, Miss Sinclair. Your witness.
Miss Sinclair, I show you the defendant's shotgun.
Yes, sir.
Here. Take it. You've handled it before. You've told us that, haven't you? Don't be afraid. It's not loaded this time. I give you my word. There. Now then, here are 2 shells. Shells manufactured to fit that type of gun. They are blank, however. The shot's been removed. Take them.
Please.
Go ahead. They won't bite you.
Your Honor, I object to this exhibition. This young
Your
girl...
Honor, this is necessary to the prosecution's case.
Objection overruled. You may proceed, subject to future connection.
Thank you, Your Honor. Now then, you have the gun and shells. Load that gun exactly as you did on the morning of October 22nd. Well, what are you waiting for? Please, I'm sorry, but I must insist.
I can't. I was lying. I don't know how those shells got in the gun, but I know Vern didn't do it. I was just trying to help.
And you're very young and very inexperienced. Remember that in the future. Clerk, please help us from the stand.
Yes, sir. I call the defendant, Vernon Craig, to the stand.
Vernon Craig. Vernon Craig.
Mr. Craig, had you an explanation for the fact that your shotgun was loaded?
I just don't know. I might have loaded the gun, but I've never done a thing like that before. Handled a loaded gun in the house, it doesn't seem possible. Unless Mr. Bronson didn't unload it as he thought he did.
Well, obviously, when you began to clean your gun, you didn't have the safety catch on.
No, sir, I didn't.
Just how did it happen that the gun went off?
Well, I had that oily cleaning rag in my hand, and I was trying to grip the gun, but it slipped.
And in falling, the gun was discharged accidentally.
Yes, sir, that can happen very easily.
Thank you. That's all.
I won't keep you long, Mr. Craig. There's only one important point here to be cleared up for the jury. It looks as if we'll have to attempt another experiment with this gun. Now, here, I'll cock it. But the shells it contains are only blank. Now then, we'll determine just exactly how much of a jar it does take to discharge this gun. Try it, Mr. Craig. Hit the butt on the floor. Sure. Again. Harder, Mr. Craig, harder.
It won't do it. But it did it before. I swear it did.
It looks as if your luck was still out, I'm afraid. I'll take that gun now.
There, the hammer dropped, see? Just as you took the gun.
Well, maybe you urged it a little bit as you handed it to me.
No, I didn't. All that banging on the floor wouldn't dislodge the hammer, but the little jar when I put the gun in your hand set it off.
Probably it did after the hammering you gave it. But you didn't hammer and bang the gun on the floor when your wife was shot, did you?
Well, no, but don't you see?
And it was you who coached Miss Sinclair to tell the story she did on the stand.
I don't know why she said that. I tell you, the gun went off accidentally.
That's all.
The defense rests, Your Honor.
The case rests.
Sum up for the defense, please, Counselor.
Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, what is the kind of evidence which the prosecution has arrayed against the defendant? Circumstantial evidence, all of it, from first to last. The state would have you believe that the defendant was in love with his first wife, but that she hated him. They would have you believe that this man committed murder because of a woman who hated him. And what if the witness, Cole Bronson, does state that he borrowed the gun in question and himself cleaned it before its return? Remember, it was a cold day. Mr. Bronson himself says that he had been drinking. Do not forget that the gun was accidentally discharged just as the defendant first picked it up. The state will no doubt remind you of the unfortunate attempt of the youthful witness to protect the defendant. Well, no matter what her motive, keep this always in mind. This witness was the sister of the dead woman, and if she had seen the defendant level his shotgun and deliberately take aim at her sister, nothing on the face of this earth could prevent her so testifying. And so, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. The case of the prosecution, which on the surface seems so strong, is in reality so flimsy that the first application of logic to its structure sends it crashing to destruction. I know, as you must know by now, that the defendant is fully deserving of a verdict of not guilty.
Sum up for the prosecution, please.
If please, Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. I wonder if the learned counsel for the defense is aware that of all kinds of evidence, circumstantial evidence can be the most incriminating, depending, as it does, upon an intricate network of dovetailed facts that raise the odds against coincidence to 1,000,000 to 1. It has been shown that the shotgun which fired the fatal charge had been cleaned and emptied of its shells before being returned to its owner. The defendant admits that he may have reloaded that shotgun. But is it likely that if he did reload it, that his purpose was innocent? Do experienced hunters load guns in their homes? And how do we explain the fact that the shotgun could not be discharged here in this courtroom until it had been violently banged and hammered on the floor, although it was stripped with such suspicious ease there in the privacy of the defendant's home? I admit you cannot find the defendant guilty if there is the slightest doubt of his guilt in your mind. But, ladies and gentlemen, is there any such doubt? It would be completely incredible if there were. And therefore, I demand a verdict of guilty.
The jury filed into the jury room to deliberate the fate of the defendant. Both the prosecution and the defense had made appeals to their reason, but which side could do so with the most justice? Was Vernon Craig guilty of a particularly cowardly murder, or was his wife the victim of a terrible accident? We will bring you the actual verdict in just a moment. The jury was absent from the courtroom for 3 hours before they returned with their verdict.
We find the defendant, Vernon Craig, not guilty.
Vernon Craig was acquitted by the jury of the terrible charge of murder, being given the benefit of the doubt. He was judged and found innocent because of a jury's traditional caution. The caution which is the foundation of the jury system, and which says, better that once in a while a guilty man should go free rather than have one innocent man perish. Vernon Craig may not have been guilty, so despite appearances, he was awarded his freedom. Famous jury trials, the drama of the courts drawn from actual courtroom cases. This is a Grace Gibson radio production directed by Lawrence H. Cecil.